Take a slow breath and feel the quiet settle. The waves breathe beneath a sleeping sky, and the stars shimmer like scattered lanterns above a quiet sea. The wind hums softly through linen sails waiting to rise. Far beyond the harbor, the world is still unknown, a vast mystery stretching westward into darkness. Tonight, let go of the noise of modern life and drift backward in time to the age when the ocean still held its secrets. Before the world was mapped and measured, before every coastline had a name, there were dreamers who stared at the horizon and wondered, what lies beyond? In the 15th century, Europe was alive with questions. Merchants whispered of spices from the east, scholars debated the size of the earth, kingdoms rose and fell, but one thing never changed: the longing to know what waited past the line where sky met sea. In the port cities of Italy and Portugal, sailors gathered in candle-lit taverns speaking of winds, stars, and rumors of islands that might exist somewhere beyond imagination. And among them was one man who listened more than he spoke, an Italian mariner named Christopher Columbus. He was not born into wealth or power. He had only his faith, his stubborn conviction, and an unshakable fascination with the ocean. To others, the sea was danger. To him, it was promise. The horizon was not a wall but a door. For years, Columbus studied old maps and stories of distant voyages. He traced the curve of the earth with trembling fingers, believing that if he sailed far enough west, he could reach the golden markets of Asia. The scholars said it was impossible. The sea, they warned, would never end. But Columbus, guided by his strange blend of science, faith, and stubborn hope, refused to accept that the world had limits. When he finally stood before Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain, he was weary from rejection, yet his eyes still carried the shimmer of distant waters. He promised glory, trade, and souls to be converted. But beneath all his words lived a simpler truth: the call of the unknown. And so, in the summer of 1492, 3 ships waited in the quiet harbor of Palos de la Frontera. Their sails were pale against the morning sky. Men whispered prayers. The tide began to turn. The journey that would change the shape of the world was about to begin. Now, as you breathe slowly and listen, imagine the creak of wood, the rhythm of waves, and the scent of salt on the air. The night is calm, the stars are bright, the sails are rising. Let the voyage begin. Chapter 1: The Boy and the Sea. The city of Genoa in the mid-15th century was a cradle of motion, a city born from salt and wind. Ships rocked gently in the harbor like sleeping giants, their masts creaking as gulls circled overhead. The air was thick with the scent of the sea: tar, wood, brine, and dreams. Fishermen shouted in rough dialects, ropes slapped against wet decks, and somewhere in the crowd of apprentices and traders, a boy stood quietly, watching. That boy was Cristoforo Colombo, the son of a wool weaver. He was not meant for the sea, not by trade nor birth, but destiny does not always respect design. From the narrow alleys of Genoa's old quarter, he would walk down to the docks, drawn by the glimmer of water and the strange music of the port. The groan of timber, the clatter of cargo, the distant murmur of languages from across the known world. At night, while the city's lamps flickered like timid stars, Columbus would sit by the small window of his father's house, gazing toward the dark horizon. He would imagine ships beyond sight, bound for places he could barely pronounce: Lisbon, Alexandria, Constantinople. To him, the world was not a collection of boundaries, but a map of possibilities waiting to unfold. He had little formal education, but curiosity made him a scholar. He devoured whatever scraps of knowledge he could find. maps copied by hand, journals from travelers, and tales whispered by sailors who had seen the coasts of Africa and the islands of Madeira. His fingers traced coastlines that looked more like dreams than geography. Each line curved outward, promising mystery. Sometimes he would visit the old cartographer near the port, a patient man who taught him the language of the sea, how to read latitude from the sun, how to measure distance by stars, how to trust the wind's changing breath. "The ocean," the old man said once, "is not cruel, only honest. It gives back exactly what you bring to it." Columbus listened. He carried those words with him like a quiet prophecy. In the marketplace, amid the cries of merchants, he overheard sailors speak of a man named Marco Polo, the Venetian who had traveled to the east, to kingdoms of gold and silk, to lands where the sun rose red and strange. Columbus found a tattered copy of Polo's book and read it by candlelight until the wax melted down to his fingers. Each page set his heart beating faster. Asia, Cathay, Chipango, names that sounded like spells. The sea became more than a body of water. It became a bridge between what was known and what might be. Genoa, for all its glory, began to feel too small. The walls pressed inward. The boy longed for wind and distance. When he turned 14, he found work on a merchant vessel bound for Chios, near the Aegean Sea. For the first time, he felt the ship roll beneath his feet, a rhythm that would become his life's heartbeat. Days bled into nights, the horizon never stopped moving. Storms rose and fell, and he learned that fear was not an enemy, but a teacher. He learned how ropes groan under strain, how stars shift at midnight, how silence after thunder feels like prayer. By the time he was 16, Columbus had sailed as far as England and the northern coasts of Africa. The world expanded with every voyage. He saw the wealth of Lisbon's harbours, the deserts of Morocco, the bustle of trading ports where Africans, Arabs and Europeans exchanged not only goods but beliefs. He realized how vast the earth was, yet how incomplete the maps seemed. When his ship once caught fire off the coast of Portugal, he barely survived, clinging to a piece of wreckage as the sea tossed him toward land. Crawling ashore near Lisbon, coughing salt and smoke, he should have been defeated. Instead, he looked back at the ocean and whispered a vow. He would understand it, no matter how long it took. In Lisbon, he met navigators who spoke of new routes down the coast of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope. But what if, he wondered, there was a shorter way? What if the world curved back upon itself? What if the unknown was not endless, but round? Every evening he walked to the cliffs outside the city. The sun would sink into the Atlantic like a coin into deep water. Most men saw the sunset and thought it was the edge of the world. Columbus saw a path. He imagined unseen lands beyond that line, forests untouched, mountains unnamed, stars that no one had yet followed. He imagined ships cutting across that endless blue, guided by faith more than knowledge. The sea wind lifted his hair. The waves lapped below, patient and eternal. Somewhere inside him, a quiet certainty grew. The world must curve toward something more. And as twilight folded over the Atlantic, young Columbus whispered into the wind, almost to himself, "Someday I will find it." The waves answered with a hush, as if the ocean had already heard his promise. Chapter 2. The Dream of the West. The room smelled of wax and salt. A single candle flickered beside a pile of worn parchments, its flame bowing and swaying each time the Atlantic wind pressed against the shutters. Christopher Columbus bent over the table, his eyes tracing invisible paths across the map's yellowed surface. His fingers moved slowly, as though they could feel the curvature of the earth through paper. Outside, Lisbon slept. The hum of the harbor had quieted, ships resting like beasts tethered to stone. But inside this small rented room, a man wrestled with the boundaries of the known world. The candle hissed, wax pooled like molten gold beside his wrist. On the table lay maps copied from ancient sources, Ptolemy's world, the drawings of Arab geographers, sketches of coastlines by Portuguese pilots who had followed Africa's long, treacherous edge. Columbus compared them by memory and instinct. He noted how the continents might curve, how the distances might shrink if one accepted that the world was not infinite, but round, a perfect circle waiting to be crossed. To many scholars, such musings were not new. They already knew the earth was round. What set Columbus apart was not the shape he imagined, but the distance he believed it held. He thought Asia lay much closer than the wise men said, perhaps just a few weeks' sail west from Europe. If so, one could reach the riches of Cathay without braving the endless deserts or the southern passage around Africa. It was a beautiful theory and a dangerous one. He had tried to speak of it to others, to ship captains in the taverns, to merchants, even to a few minor nobles, but each time laughter followed him like a shadow. They said the voyage would be endless, that no ship could survive so far from land, that the ocean would swallow any man foolish enough to try. Still, Columbus persisted. He spent hours in the libraries of Lisbon, poring over manuscripts that smelled of dust and salt. He read Marco Polo again and again, lingering over the descriptions of gold, silk, and spices. The East shimmered in his imagination like a promise, yet the maps were incomplete, the distances uncertain. He began to make his own, sketching coastlines and measuring with crude instruments. In the evenings, he walked the docks. The sailors of Portugal were unlike any others, sun-scorched, wind-bitten, eyes sharp with experience. They had sailed farther than most men could dream, to Guinea, to the Canary Islands, to the Cape Verde coast. Columbus listened to their stories of strange currents that pushed westward, of floating vegetation found far from land, of carved wood washed ashore that came from no known coast. The sea itself seemed to whisper hints of another world. Sometimes, as the sun sank beyond the Atlantic, he would stand among the ships and feel the pull of the horizon. The tide breathed against the stone piers like the heartbeat of something ancient. The world, he thought, was not finished. It was still unfolding, still waiting to be seen. But poverty clung to him. His letters of proposal went unanswered. The Portuguese crown, busy with its African ventures, dismissed his ideas. He was just another foreigner with dreams bigger than his means. In those years, Columbus married Filipa Moniz, the daughter of a respected navigator. For a while, life softened. They lived on the island of Porto Santo, quiet and windswept, where he helped in trading voyages to Madeira and the Azores. He learned to read the ocean's moods, the color of water that signaled shallow reefs, the faint scent of land carried by wind, the way birds changed their flight when coastlines drew near. The sea became not only his teacher, but his companion. At night, he would spread his maps across the table and talk softly to his wife about his theory. "If we sail west," he would say, tracing a line from Spain into empty blue, "we will reach the Indies faster than any ship that dares the southern route. The world curves this way, Philippa. I can feel it." She would smile gently, knowing there was no reasoning with a man possessed by the horizon. When she died, the silence that followed was unbearable. Yet even grief, could not turn him from his obsession. He left the islands and returned to Lisbon, then later to Spain, carrying his papers, his maps, his stubborn hope. Sometimes, alone by candlelight, he would close his eyes and imagine the journey. The waves lifting him westward, the stars spinning in their silent dance, the wind filling sails like lungs. He could see it so clearly. A fleet crossing the edge of the world, not falling, not vanishing, but finding land bathed in sunrise. Others mocked him for arrogance, for daring to think he could reach Asia by crossing a sea no one had charted. But Columbus felt it as certainty, not pride. Faith and logic braided together inside him. The kind of faith that made a man both brave and blind. Each morning, before the city awoke, he walked to the cliffs and watched the ocean turn gold beneath the dawn. Sometimes he whispered to it, as if it could hear, "You are not the end. You are the beginning." The waves did not answer, but the rhythm of their breaking seemed to echo his conviction. In the heart of that silence, a dream took root, the dream of the West. A dream that would carry him beyond reason, beyond maps, beyond the limits of what his century believed possible. And somewhere out in the unseen waters, the wind waited, ready to fill his sails. Chapter 3. The Spanish Court. The road to Granada was long, dusty, and cruelly bright. Beneath the Andalusian sun, Christopher Columbus rode in silence, his clothes faded by salt and travel, his saddle worn thin. The rhythm of the hooves kept him steady, a quiet heartbeat against uncertainty. Ahead lay not just a city, but the judgment of his life's dream. Spain was in triumph. The banners of Castile and Aragon fluttered high. The last Moorish kingdom had fallen, and Ferdinand and Isabella were now sovereigns of a united realm. Bells rang from distant towers, soldiers marched through the gates, and the air was heavy with the scent of victory. To most, it was a time of celebration. To Columbus, it was the narrow opening of a door he had knocked upon for years. When he first reached the royal camp, he was one of hundreds. Petitioners, soldiers, traders, priests, all hoping for an audience. His clothes spoke of travel, not status, his eyes of endurance, not charm. Yet there was something unshakable in his manner, something that caught the attention of a few curious courtiers. A man who looked perpetually toward the horizon. He submitted his proposal, 3 ships crewed by brave men, to sail west into the unknown and reach the riches of Asia. He spoke of gold and spices, of new lands, of conversions to the faith. But behind the practiced phrases was a deeper note, a quiet certainty that could not be feigned. The first responses were polite refusals. The court scholars examined his ideas and shook their heads. They said his calculations were wrong, his distances absurdly short, his plan doomed. The Atlantic, they warned, was not an open path but a vast desert of water. The monarchs listened, nodded, and dismissed him with formal courtesy. Still he lingered. Days became weeks. Columbus stayed in nearby towns waiting for news, revising his maps and writing letters. He endured whispers. The foreign dreamer, the mad Genoese, the man who thought the world was smaller than God made it. He attended Mass in silence, his hat pressed to his chest, praying not for glory, but for a chance. Now and then he was invited to courtly gatherings, more as curiosity than guest. He watched the nobles with their embroidered garments, the gleam of gold and silk under torchlight. He felt the vast gulf between himself and them, between the weaver's son and the rulers of kingdoms. Yet when he spoke, his words carried a strange gravity. His voice did not rise or plead, It flowed, calm and deliberate, like the tide. It was in those moments that Queen Isabella began to take notice. She was not impulsive. Hers was a measured mind, disciplined by both faith and responsibility. She saw in Columbus something familiar, the stubborn endurance of a believer. When others laughed, she listened. When others turned away, she asked questions. "Señor Colon," she once said gently, "you truly believe the Lord has placed this idea in your heart?" Columbus bowed low. "Your Majesty, I believe he has placed the sea itself there, and it will not be still." Her eyes softened, but she said nothing more. Months passed. Rejection came again, this time final. Advisors urged her to invest in safer ventures, in consolidating her newly won lands. Columbus, disheartened, left the court. He rode north through the fields of Castile, the wind cold on his face, his hope dimming with each mile. In a small inn near Palos, he sat one evening with his head in his hands, the sound of rain on the roof. The dream that had carried him for half his life seemed to falter. Perhaps the world would remain undiscovered. Perhaps it was not his to find. Then one morning, as he prepared to leave Spain forever, a messenger arrived on horseback, drenched, breathless, bearing a sealed letter with the royal crest. The Queen had changed her mind. She had spoken with her confessor, with trusted allies, and, above all, with her own conscience. If God had made the world vast, she reasoned, then perhaps he had also given men the courage to explore it. To deny the attempt would be to deny faith itself. And so, in the spring of 1492, Columbus was summoned once more to the royal presence. The throne room was silent when he entered. Sunlight fell through stained glass, casting colours upon the marble floor. He knelt, the scent of incense and cedar filling the air. Isabella looked down at him, not as a queen to a subject, but as one soul recognizing another's devotion. "Rise, Signor Colon," she said softly. "You shall have your ships." He lifted his head, hardly believing. "The crown of Castile will support your voyage. 3 vessels to sail westward in the name of God and Spain. May he guide your path." Columbus bowed deeply, emotion tightening his throat. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, a dove cooed from the window ledge, and somewhere beyond the palace walls, the sea breathed faintly against the horizon. When he finally left the chamber, he stepped into the cool courtyard and felt the sunlight on his face. Everything had changed, and yet the world was quiet, as if holding its breath. He looked west, toward the unseen ocean, and whispered, "She believes." The wind stirred the leaves as if in reply. The promise of ships had been made, and history, though still sleeping, had begun to wake. Chapter 4. The Departure. The morning of August 3rd, 1492 came quietly. The first light slipped across the horizon like a breath, washing the port of Palos de la Frontera in pale gold. Mist clung to the water, softening the lines of ships and masts, blurring the difference between sea and sky. The air smelled of salt, rope, and dawn, a scent both ancient and eternal. The harbour stirred slowly to life. Fishermen moved among their boats, voices hushed, as though afraid to disturb the sacred stillness of that hour. Mothers stood on the shore with shawls pulled tight around their shoulders, eyes fixed on the ships that would soon sail into the unknown. Children clung to their skirts, too young to understand what was being risked, but old enough to feel the ache of parting. 3 ships waited at anchor, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. Their hulls gleamed with dew, ropes groaned softly under tension, and gulls wheeled above them in slow, graceful circles. The sound of creaking wood mixed with the whisper of waves lapping against the stone quay. Columbus stood on the deck of the Santa Maria, his cloak pulled close, his gaze fixed toward the west. Behind him, sailors prepared provisions, tied barrels, and murmured prayers under their breath. The night before, the men had confessed their sins, received communion, and slept little. For them, the sea was no longer merely water. It was a border between the world they knew and something vast, nameless, and possibly endless. "Are you afraid?" one of the younger sailors asked an older man as they adjusted the sails. The elder looked toward the horizon. "Fear is part of the voyage," he said quietly. "Only fools forget that."
Columbus heard but said nothing. He felt the same fear pulsing in his chest, not the fear of the sea itself, but of failure, of returning to Spain empty-handed, of proving all his doubters right. Yet beneath that fear was another current, faith, deep and steady. He believed the ocean would open before him as surely as dawn had opened the sky.
The bells of the monastery of La Rábida tolled faintly in the distance. Monks gathered to bless the sailors, their chants low and solemn, rising and falling with the wind. Columbus bowed his head as holy water touched his forehead. When he lifted his eyes again, he saw the Queen's banner fluttering from the tallest mast, the cross of Castile against white cloth, bright against the grey morning. "Hoist the sails!" he commanded. Canvas unfurled with a sigh, catching the newborn wind. The Pinta and Nina followed, their sails filling like wings. Ropes strained, pulleys clattered, and the ships began to drift from the shore. The crowd on land pressed forward, waving, crying out blessings and farewells. A fisherman crossed himself 3 times. A woman fell to her knees, clutching her child. The voices of the departing sailors echoed faintly, fragments of hymns, prayers, laughter, forced through trembling. The tide turned. Slowly, almost reverently, the fleet moved out of the harbor. Columbus stood at the stern, watching the shoreline shrink. The white walls of Palos faded behind the mist. He could see the figures of people waving, their hands small now, like birds fluttering on the edge of memory. The world he knew was slipping away, drawn backward by time and distance. As the ships reached open water, the wind grew stronger. The sails swelled, ropes hummed, and the timbers of the Santa Maria groaned like something alive. Gulls followed for a while, crying over the waves, then turned back, unwilling to cross that invisible threshold. The men stood in silence for a long time, each lost in thought. Some whispered prayers. Some gripped the rails, watching the shore vanish. For a few, tears came unbidden. Tears of fear, of awe, of longing. Only when the last trace of land disappeared beneath the horizon did Columbus finally speak. "Remember this sight," he said softly, almost to himself. "The world behind us is smaller now." The crew looked to him, uncertain whether to take comfort or warning from his words. But Columbus's face was calm, illuminated by the pale morning light. In that calmness, they found a strange courage. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, the waves deepened from grey to blue, and the rhythm of the sea took hold. Every creak of the ship, every flap of the sails became part of a larger silence, a silence not of emptiness but of possibility. By nightfall, the coast of Spain was gone. The stars began to appear, scattered like silver dust across a black dome. Columbus stood alone on the deck, the wind tugging gently at his cloak. He thought of Genoa, of Lisbon, of Isabella's quiet voice when she had said, "You shall have your ships." He thought of all the laughter, the rejection, the years of waiting. And now, finally, the ocean lay before him, vast, indifferent, and infinite. He closed his eyes and breathed in the salt air. Somewhere beyond the horizon, he believed, waited the Indies, gold, silk, spices, glory. Yet what stirred deepest within him was not greed, but wonder. He felt like a child again, standing on the docks of Genoa, staring into the unknown and whispering to the sea. The wind shifted, the ships leaned into their journey. Far behind them, the waves erased the traces of their passing. Ahead, only the open Atlantic stretched in endless calm. And as the night deepened, the stars reflected softly upon the dark water, like candles drifting on a prayer. Chapter 5: Days of Endless Blue. The ocean had no edges, it stretched outward in every direction, a moving mirror of blue and light, breathing in endless rhythm. Each morning began the same, the slow groan of wood, the creak of ropes tightening, the sigh of canvas filling with wind. The men rose from their cramped corners below deck, blinking into the glare, salt already crusted on their faces. For a time, the novelty of adventure carried them. The first weeks were filled with stories, laughter, small hopes. They spoke of what they would bring home, gold, jewels, glory, and of the warm welcome that awaited them in Spain. But as the coast of Europe faded from memory and only the horizon remained, the laughter grew thin. The sea became their world, and that world did not change. Days turned into a single color: blue sky, blue sea, blue thought. The water shimmered like polished glass, unbroken by land or shape. Some nights the waves glowed faintly with phosphorescence, as if the sea itself were dreaming. Others, it was black and vast, the stars wheeling overhead like cold fire. The men grew restless. They whispered of monsters said to live beneath the surface, of whirlpools that could swallow ships whole, of curses for those who sailed too far west. A sailor crossed himself each morning and kissed the wooden rail. Another tied a small charm of bone around his wrist to ward off evil spirits. Their faith, like their courage, shifted with the tide. Food was rationed. The salted meat grew hard, the water stale. Bread turned to dust in their hands. They chewed slowly, swallowing not for hunger, but for habit. The air below deck was thick and sour, filled with sweat and mildew. Yet they endured, because no one could imagine turning back. Columbus kept to his quarters often, writing by candlelight. The ship swayed gently, the flame bending with each motion. He recorded the distance sailed each day. 2 sets of numbers, one true, one false. The false distance was smaller, a secret he shared only with the page. He lied for the sake of peace, trimming miles from the log to quiet the fear that grew among his men. If they knew how far they had truly gone, they might mutiny before reaching anywhere. He wrote with steady hand, though doubt gnawed quietly beneath his calm. He could not show it. The admiral must never tremble. At night, he would climb to the deck alone. The air cooled, the sea hissed softly against the hull. Above him, the stars seemed close enough to touch. He studied them, his silent compass, tracing patterns the ancients once used to navigate by faith and memory. The constellations were his only proof that the world still made sense. Some nights he imagined that the stars moved, shifting westward as though drawing him onward. Other nights he felt they watched him, patient, indifferent witnesses to his gamble. The crew began to murmur. "We've sailed too far," some said. "The world ends out here." Others claimed the ocean was shrinking, that soon there would be no wind left to carry them home. The Pinta's helmsman swore he'd seen seaweed floating that could only come from shallow waters. The next day, it was gone. Columbus gathered them on deck. His voice was calm but firm. "Brothers," he said, "the ocean tests all men, but the reward lies just beyond patience. Have faith. The signs are good. Birds to the west, warm winds, clear skies. The Indies are near." He smiled, though his heart thudded like a drum. When the men dispersed, some looked reassured, others only stared into the distance, lips moving in silent prayer. Days passed. The sameness became a weight, a spell that dulled the senses. They sang at night to keep their spirits alive, old songs of home, of vineyards, of women, of the hills of Castile. Their voices rose above the sea like smoke fading into the stars. For a few moments, the ocean seemed smaller. Then silence returned. On the 31st day, the compass behaved strangely. The needle drifted, quivering away from true north. Fear rippled through the crew like wind through sails. Columbus studied it long into the night, pretending calm. He wrote in his journal, a marvel perhaps caused by the movement of the heavens themselves. He would not admit that his hands trembled. The next dawn, the sea was still. Too still. The wind had died completely. The sails hung limp, the ships barely moving. The ocean reflected the sky so perfectly that it seemed they floated between two mirrors. The men grew quiet, the silence heavy as stone. That night, Columbus could not sleep. He went to the deck, alone again. The moon hung low, painting the water with silver. He leaned on the rail and whispered a prayer, not loud, not desperate, but intimate, like a confession.
"O Lord," he murmured, "if I am lost, let it be only in thy will. If this sea has no end, let my heart not despair before my eyes do."
The stars flickered faintly in reply. Somewhere deep below, the ocean shifted. Slow, unseen, eternal. He stood there for a long time, between heaven and water, between faith and madness, until dawn began to pale the sky. And when the wind returned at last, touching the sails like a breath from God, the men woke to hope again, fragile, flickering, but alive. The voyage went on. Chapter 6. The First Birds, the First Light. The ocean began to change.
After more than 2 months of sailing west into an unending horizon, the water that had once been a deep, merciless blue now softened in color. It turned greener, lighter, alive with drifting patches of seaweed that floated like forgotten gardens. The air, too, grew warmer, fragrant in a way none could name. The men noticed it first, a sweetness hidden beneath the salt, as though the wind carried the scent of unseen forests.
They whispered among themselves. Some said it was a sign, others said it was a trick of the sea, a cruel illusion before the end. Yet beneath their murmurs, something had shifted, a quiet thread of hope weaving through their exhaustion. Then came the birds. Small at first, dark shapes against the twilight, circling low over the water. They followed the ships for hours, dipping into the waves, rising again. The men crowded the decks, pointing, calling out. Birds meant land. They meant trees, fresh water, rest, life.
Columbus stood at the rail of the Santa Maria, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He said nothing, but his heart beat faster. The signs were all there, the color of the sea, the floating branches, the birds that never strayed far from shore. He had written it many times in his journal, tracing faith into reason, hope into proof. Now, at last, nature itself seemed to confirm his conviction.
Each day, new flocks appeared, gulls, herons, and once a small green bird that landed briefly on a mast before vanishing westward. The men watched it go with reverence, as though it were a messenger. "Do you see?" Columbus murmured to his pilot. "Even the creatures of the sky are guiding us." But hope is a fragile thing at sea. For every man who believed, another doubted. They argued in whispers at night, voices rising with fear. "What if the birds are lost?" one said. "What if they too have no land to return to?" Columbus listened from the shadows. He understood their fear. It was his own, though he refused to speak it. In his journal he wrote, "The men grow anxious, yet the signs increase. I feel the Lord near." Days passed. On October 11th, the wind calmed and the stars burned clear above the masts. The night was unusually still. Columbus paced the deck, unable to rest. Every sense was awake. The creak of the hull, the slap of waves against wood, the faint rustle of canvas. He gazed westward, where the darkness met the sea in a line that shimmered faintly like breath on glass. Sometime near midnight, he saw what he later described as a small candle of light rising and falling. It flickered once, twice, and was gone. He called to the helmsman, but no one else had seen it. The moment passed, yet his heart knew. "Land," he whispered, "it must be near." He stayed awake until the first blush of dawn. The men took turns at watch, peering into the dim horizon, their eyes aching with hope. And then, just before sunrise, a cry cut through the silence. "Tierra! Tierra!" The voice came from the Pinta. A sailor named Rodrigo de Triana shouted from the crow's nest, his finger trembling toward the horizon. The words echoed across the water, waking every soul on board. "Land! Land!" the men repeated, rushing to the rails.
Through the grey light, a dark line emerged, faint at first, then growing, solid, undeniable, a shape that was not cloud or wave, but earth.
Some fell to their knees, sobbing, others laughed and embraced. The ships erupted in prayer and chaos. Men crossed themselves again and again, thanking God through tears and disbelief. Columbus stood silent, his face pale in the rising sun. He gripped the rail until his knuckles whitened. The world had shifted. The unknown had given way to something real. For a long time, he could not speak, only stare at the faint green outline ahead, gilded by the first light of morning. As the sun rose higher, the land grew clearer, a low island covered in trees, the beaches bright and untouched. The sea shimmered around it, calm as glass. Columbus fell to his knees and whispered, "The Gloria Patri." The men joined him, their voices trembling with gratitude. By mid-morning, the ships anchored near the shore. Columbus donned his finest garments, a scarlet cloak, the banner of Spain held high. The air was warm, filled with the hum of unseen insects and the sound of gentle waves brushing the sand. He stepped into the small boat, oars dipping silently into the clear water. When his boots touched the shore, the world seemed to pause. The sand was soft, the wind fragrant with life. Behind him, the sea whispered against the rocks as if exhaling centuries of mystery. He knelt, pressed his lips to the earth, and wept. Then he raised the royal standard and declared the island for Castile and Aragon, naming it San Salvador, Holy Savior. The men followed, crossing themselves, some laughing, some still stunned into silence. They wandered the beach like children, marveling at shells, at strange fruits fallen from unseen trees, at the gentle song of birds echoing through the forest. For Columbus, it was not triumph that filled him, but awe. The world was larger, more mysterious, more sacred than he had imagined. Every leaf, every ripple, every breeze felt alive with divine intention. He turned toward the ocean he had crossed, the endless blue now broken by land, and breathed deeply. For the first time in months, the air smelled of green things, of soil, of home. And as the sun climbed over the horizon, gilding the sails behind him, Columbus whispered a quiet prayer. "Thank you, Lord, for showing that the world is indeed round, and that faith, if carried far enough, finds shore." The waves lapped gently against the sand as though blessing his words. And above them, a bird, the same small green one from days before, rose from a tree and flew inland, disappearing into the morning light. Chapter 7. The Land of Gentle Faces. The morning air was soft, fragrant with life. After months of salt and silence, the scent of green things filled the sailors' lungs like a promise. From the deck of the Santa Maria, Columbus watched as the shoreline brightened under the sun. White sand, palms bending in the wind, the shimmer of turquoise shallows. The world before him looked nothing like Spain, yet it glowed with a beauty that felt ancient, untouched, almost holy. The small boats pushed through gentle surf. Oars dipped and rose, leaving trails of silver in the water. When the keels scraped the sand, the men stepped out hesitantly, their boots sinking into the soft warmth of a new continent. The waves folded around their ankles like a greeting. Birds sang in voices none of them had heard before. Butterflies drifted through the air, bright yellow, blue, red, and from the trees came the steady hum of unseen insects. Columbus knelt again and pressed his hand to the sand, feeling the fine grains stick to his palm. It was as if the earth itself were alive beneath his fingers. He stood and looked inland. Figures were emerging from the trees. They came slowly, barefoot, carrying no weapons, men and women with skin the color of copper and eyes dark as river stones. Their hair shone in the light, long and black, adorned with feathers and beads. The air between the two groups seemed to hold its breath. Columbus raised his hand, a gesture of peace. The islanders did the same. Then one of them smiled, a wide, bright, unguarded smile, and the tension dissolved like mist. The Taino people, as he would later learn they were called, moved closer. They touched the Spaniards' clothes, marveling at the rough texture of wool, the coolness of metal buckles. They laughed softly, speaking words the sailors could not understand, their voices lilting like music. In return, Columbus offered glass beads, small bells, and bits of colored cloth. The Taino received them with wonder, pressing them to their chests, holding them up to the sun, as if to see what kind of magic they contained. One young boy placed a necklace of shells around Columbus's wrist and nodded shyly. Everywhere there was curiosity, but no fear. The islanders seemed as gentle as the land itself. They led the newcomers toward their village, walking barefoot on paths lined with flowers and fruit trees. The air grew heavy with sweetness. Mango, guava, something like honey. The village was open and welcoming. Round houses with thatched roofs stood in circles around a central clearing. Children laughed as dogs darted between their legs. Women pounded grain in wooden bowls, the rhythm echoing softly through the air. From somewhere beyond the huts came the deep, slow beat of a drum. The Spaniards sat on woven mats and were offered fruit and water from hollowed gourds. Columbus tasted something unlike anything he had ever known. Tender, golden, cool on his tongue. Around him, the men smiled for the first time in weeks. The ocean's hunger, the fear, the endless blue all seemed to vanish in this green, breathing world. He observed the Taino closely, noting their kindness, their lack of greed, their simple joy. In his journal, he would later write, "They are a people of great gentleness. They give all they have for whatever is offered to them. They have no iron or weapons, nor do they seem to need them." Yet even as he wrote those words, a shadow passed through his thoughts. He called them Indians, believing still that he had reached Asia, that these were subjects of some distant emperor in Cathay. He imagined the riches their islands might yield, the souls ready for conversion, the empire waiting to be claimed. He could not see that what stood before him was not the edge of Asia, but the beginning of a new world. That night, as the sun set in slow fire over the western sea, the Taino gathered by the shore. They lit torches and began to dance. The rhythm of drums carried across the beach, deep and steady like a heartbeat. The Spaniards watched in awe, the flickering flames painting faces with gold and shadow. Laughter rose like music. The sea shimmered with reflection. It was a moment of peace, so perfect it almost seemed unreal. Two worlds meeting beneath the same stars, unaware of what history would demand of them. Columbus stood apart for a while, watching the firelight play across the gentle faces of the people who had welcomed him as though he were family. Their innocence touched something inside him, a quiet ache he could not name. He turned toward the ocean, its dark surface stretching endlessly behind him, and for the first time he felt a strange stillness. He had reached what he believed was Asia, yet the map in his mind did not match the world before his eyes. The land was too pure, the people too open. It did not fit the stories of golden empires and silk markets. It felt instead like a garden untouched by greed, fragile, perfect, and fleeting. He looked back at the Taino, dancing, laughing, their torches flickering against the sea breeze. And in that soft light, the man who had crossed an ocean began to sense, though dimly, that discovery was never simple, and wonder always carried a cost. As the drums faded and the stars deepened overhead, Columbus whispered a prayer, not for victory, but for understanding. The night answered with silence, broken only by the sound of waves folding gently against the shore, as if the ocean itself were breathing out the word peace for the last time. Chapter 8. The Christmas Shipwreck. The night was calm, too calm for what was about to happen. It was Christmas Eve, 1492, off the northern coast of Hispaniola. The moon hung low, round and golden, casting a path of trembling light across the still sea. The Santa Maria, heavy with supplies and hopes, drifted gently through the dark waters. The air was soft and sweet, carrying the scent of distant forests. Even the ocean, that great restless spirit, seemed to sleep. The men were weary. They had been sailing along the coast for weeks, their eyes dazzled by the beauty of this strange land, its mountains veiled in mist, its rivers shining like veins of silver, its people warm and generous. That night, they were not thinking of discovery or empire, they were thinking of home. Many of them, lulled by the peaceful sea, had gone to sleep. The helmsman, overcome by drowsiness, left his post to a young, inexperienced cabin boy. The boy stood at the tiller watching the moon shimmer on the waves, unaware of the slow pull of the current beneath the ship, a pull that led directly toward danger. Columbus, exhausted, had retired to his quarters. For the first time in months, he felt a fragile peace. The voyage had succeeded beyond imagination. He had found land, people, paradise itself. The ocean that once seemed endless had become a bridge between two worlds. He closed his eyes, whispering a prayer of thanks. But fate, like the sea, moves without warning. Shortly after midnight, a sound shattered the stillness, a deep, hollow crack. The Santa Maria lurched, wood groaning against coral. Men leapt from their hammocks, shouting. The ship shuddered again, then stopped, her hull grinding against the hidden reef. "Rocks!" someone cried. "We've run aground!"
Columbus rushed to the deck. The night was bright with moonlight, the sea eerily calm. But beneath that calm, disaster had already taken root. The ship's keel was wedged deep into coral, the tide pressing her farther inland with each slow wave. The rudder had splintered. Water seeped through the hull, cold against the men's feet.
"Man the pumps!" Columbus shouted. "Lighten the ship! Throw the cargo overboard!" Barrels, beams, crates, all heaved into the sea. But the ship would not move. The current held her fast, as if the ocean itself refused to release her. The crew worked through the night, their shouts muffled by the rhythm of waves. The moon watched silently as they struggled, men against water, pride against fate.
By dawn, it was over. The Santa Maria could not be saved. Her ribs groaned like an old creature dying. The tide had buried her deeper, her proud masts tilting like crosses above the sea. Columbus stood at the rail, staring down at the wreck, his face hollow with disbelief.
He had crossed an ocean, defied doubt and fear, only to lose his flagship on the very shore of his triumph. Yet even in loss, his mind turned to purpose. The island, beautiful Hispaniola, offered shelter, food, friendship. The local cacique, Guacanagari, had come upon hearing the commotion. He sent canoes filled with his men who helped rescue supplies and comfort the shaken sailors. They worked tirelessly, carrying wood and barrels from the wreck, weeping at the Spaniards' sorrow as if it were their own. Columbus was moved by their kindness. He wrote in his journal that the Taino were so generous and pure of heart that no one who has seen them could fail to love them. From the remains of the Santa Maria, the men built something new, a small fortress of wood and thatch near the shore. Columbus named it La Navidad, the Nativity. In honor of the day their disaster became a beginning. La Navidad would be the first European settlement in the New World. It was little more than a cluster of huts surrounded by palisades, but to Columbus, it represented faith made visible. From wreckage, creation, from loss, rebirth. As they worked, the Taino watched curiously, offering food and gifts: parrots, cotton, fruit. The air was filled with the rhythm of axes and the soft murmur of the sea. The men sang while they labored, their voices subdued, their laughter thin but sincere. For a moment, sorrow and gratitude mingled like smoke and light. When the fort was finished, Columbus chose 39 men to remain behind. They would trade with the locals, gather gold, and prepare for future voyages. He promised to return with more ships, more supplies, more life. But beneath his steady words, something heavy pressed against his heart. He had seen enough of the world to know that human hearts were not as gentle as the Taínos. The seed of greed was already there. In the glint of the gold they had glimpsed in the riverbeds, in the whispers of easy conquest. That night, as the fires of La Navidad burned beside the dark sea, Columbus stood alone, staring at the wreck of the Santa Maria. The tide rose and fell, washing over the broken timbers, carrying away fragments of rope and wood. The ship that had carried his dream across the world was gone. He felt no anger, only humility, the strange peace that follows surrender. Perhaps he thought the sea demanded a price for every passage. Perhaps this was its offering, One vessel returned to the deep so that others might go on. He knelt in the sand and whispered a prayer. Lord, let this place be a beginning, not an end. Protect the men who remain here, and guide me safely home. The wind stirred the palms. The waves whispered softly in reply. Above him, the stars shone with unearthly brightness, reflected in the still water where his ship had once been. And for the first time since leaving Spain, Columbus felt the weight of his own smallness. A man carried by faith, by chance, by the mercy of the sea. La Navidad flickered behind him, the first fragile spark of Europe on a new shore, while before him stretched the infinite ocean, calm now, as if satisfied. And in that calmness, Christmas morning dawned, not in triumph, but in quiet surrender. Chapter 9: The Return Across the Storm. The sea, once calm and yielding, turned against them. It was January of 1493, and the Niña and the Pinta were alone now, fragile wooden shells adrift on the vast Atlantic. Behind them, the wreck of the Santa Maria lay buried in coral and memory. Ahead stretched an ocean that seemed to shift with every breath of wind. Columbus had left 39 men at La Navidad, their camp shining faintly on the shore as he sailed away. He promised to return, but as the coastline of Hispaniola faded into haze, a chill passed through him, the kind that no sun could warm. The voyage home began under clear skies. Trade winds filled the sails, and the ships glided eastward with the rhythm of sleep. For a few precious days, the ocean was gentle, as if granting a farewell grace. The men sang softly, their voices trembling with relief. They spoke of Spain, of wives and mothers, of the taste of bread that wasn't salted dry. Hope returned, fragile but alive. Then on February 12th, the light began to change. The sky thickened at the edges, bruised with grey and purple. The wind grew restless. The sea, once smooth as silk, began to churn. By nightfall, the horizon had vanished into blackness. The storm struck without mercy. Waves rose like living walls, vast and merciless, towering above the masts before crashing down with the force of falling mountains. The ships groaned, timbers splitting, ropes shrieking against iron rings. Men clung to anything that held still. The mast, the rail, each other, their shouts torn away by the wind. Lightning split the sky, turning the world to silver for a heartbeat, then to darkness again. Columbus, drenched to the bone, stood near the helm. He could hardly see, but his mind was clear, sharpened by fear and faith in equal measure. The storm, he believed, was no accident. It was a trial, a test of endurance and divine favor. He had faced the unknown westward. Now he must survive the return. He called the crew together when the sea allowed it. "Each man shall make his vow," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "If God delivers us safely to land, we will go in pilgrimage, barefoot, to the first church we find." The men nodded, trembling, whispering their promises into the roaring night. Some prayed to the Virgin, others to the saints. Columbus himself made a vow that should he reach Spain alive, he would return to these new lands again, not as conqueror, but as servant of the vision entrusted to him. The sea answered with another blow. A monstrous wave struck the Niña broadside, hurling barrels and men across the deck. Columbus was thrown to his knees, his hands bloodied on the planks. He looked up through the rain and saw the sails tearing like paper, the ropes thrashing like serpents. The Pinta, somewhere beyond the curtain of water, vanished from sight. "God, remember me," he whispered. "You showed me land where there was none. Show me home again."
For days, the storm did not relent. The wind screamed like a living creature, and the sky pressed down until it seemed the world had shrunk to nothing but water and fear. Columbus wrote by flickering lantern light, his ink bleeding across the page. The sea threatens to swallow us. I place all in his hands. Whatever happens is his will.
At last, on February 17th, the storm broke. The wind fell away to a weary sigh, and the ocean lay heaving in slow, heavy swells. The sky cleared, pale and thin as parchment. The Niña floated like a ghost, her sails torn but standing. Of the Pinta, there was no sign. For 2 days they drifted in silence. The men moved like shadows, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Salt crusted their lips, their hands were raw from rope and prayer. And yet, when a flock of seabirds appeared one evening, circling low and crying above the waves, hope sparked again. "Land cannot be far," Columbus murmured. He was right. On March 4th, the Niña limped into the harbor of Santa Maria in the Azores, the first solid earth beneath their feet since leaving the New World. The islanders received them with wonder, offering food and shelter. Columbus knelt on the wet sand, head bowed, and wept. Not in triumph, but in exhaustion, so deep it felt like grace. A few weeks later, battered but alive, he reached Spain. When the coastline came into view, the crew gathered silently on deck. No one cheered. They stood bareheaded as the ship entered Palos, their eyes bright with tears. Columbus walked to the bow, the wind pulling gently at his cloak. The port looked as it had on the morning of their departure, the same white houses, the same gulls circling above. Yet he knew that everything had changed. The world itself had shifted. When the anchor dropped, he fell to his knees upon the deck. Salt and tears mingled on the wood. Around him, the men followed, their voices murmuring prayers of thanksgiving. He whispered, barely audible, "The sea has given, and the sea has taken." He thought of the Santa Maria, of the men he had left behind at La Navidad, of the endless blue that had both tested and sustained them. The ocean had been his path, his prison, his revelation. As the sun sank behind the hills of Spain, Columbus raised his head. The air was calm, the bells of the town ringing faintly over the water. He had crossed a world no one believed could be crossed, and returned, not with riches, not with glory, but with the weight of something far greater. The proof that faith, even when it trembles, can carry a man through the storm. And as night fell over Palos, the wind softened, carrying only the scent of salt, gentle now, like a benediction. Chapter 10. A Hero's Welcome. The bells of Spain rang as though the heavens themselves had been set trembling. From every church tower in Palos de la Frontera, their voices rose into the spring air, pealing, jubilant, relentless. The townspeople poured into the streets, shouting his name.
Colón! Colón! El almirante del mar océano!
After 7 long months, the man who had sailed into the unknown and returned alive was no longer a mystery or a fool. He was a legend. The Niña glided into the harbor under clear skies, her sails patched, her timbers worn. Yet to those who waited on the shore, she appeared as something almost holy. Mothers lifted their children to sea, old men crossed themselves, and priests chanted blessings. Word spread faster than the tide. The Genoese dreamer had done the impossible. He had reached the Indies and come back to tell the tale. Columbus stood on the deck, silent. The cheers rolled toward him like waves, but he did not raise his hands, did not smile. His body was there, but his mind drifted somewhere between ocean and sky. The noise of the crowd felt distant, unreal. He had lived too long with silence to understand this kind of sound again. When he stepped ashore, the mayor knelt before him. The friars sprinkled holy water upon his path. Children ran beside him, tossing petals of spring flowers. It was a hero's welcome, but Columbus felt only the strange weight of being seen, as if the world had already begun to claim his dream for its own. In the days that followed, Spain became drunk on his return. Messengers rode to the royal court in Barcelona, carrying news of his triumph. The admiral of the ocean sea had found islands rich in gold and souls ripe for salvation. The Queen herself ordered a grand procession for his arrival. When he reached Barcelona weeks later, the city shone like a jewel. Tapestries hung from balconies, banners of Castile and Aragon fluttered above crowded streets. Trumpets blared as he entered through the city gates, leading a strange parade. Sailors in sun-faded clothes, parrots perched on their shoulders, and behind them a few Taino people dressed in simple woven cloth, bewildered by the spectacle. They carried gifts from the islands, bright feathers, woven baskets, pieces of gold gleaming like captured sunlight. Ferdinand and Isabella waited in a great hall draped with crimson and gold. When Columbus approached, he knelt before them, his head bowed low. But the Queen rose, motioned for him to stand, and said, "We honor you not as a subject, but as one chosen by Providence." He spoke then, carefully, humbly, of the journey, the storms, the birds that had guided them, the kindness of the islanders. He described rivers of pure water, trees heavy with fruit, and lands where the soil seemed to promise endless harvest. He spoke of gold, too, because he knew they expected it, and of new souls ready to be baptized. The courtiers murmured in awe. The Queen's eyes glistened with devotion, the King's with ambition. They saw in him not the weary sailor who had risked his life, but the beginning of an empire. Columbus was given a seat beside nobles, granted titles, pensions, honors. Poets wrote verses in his praise. Priests compared him to Moses, leading his people to a new world. Yet through all the ceremony, he remained still. His hands, scarred from rope and salt, looked out of place among jeweled goblets and silken sleeves. At banquets, he was asked again and again to tell his story, how it felt to sail beyond the map, how he had spoken with the Indians, how he had found a world where no one believed one existed. He told them what they wanted to hear, that it was glorious, that the islands overflowed with riches, that the people would gladly welcome the cross of Christ. But when the laughter grew loud and the music swelled, his eyes would wander. He saw not the gold cups before him, but the faces of the Taino, their gentle smiles, their trust. He heard their laughter by the fire, the rhythm of drums, the sound of waves folding onto white sand. He thought of the 39 men left behind at La Navidad, and wondered whether peace could survive greed. Sometimes, late at night, he would step out from the royal chambers and stand beneath the stars. The same constellations that had guided him across the sea now shimmered above Spain, unchanging, eternal. And yet the world beneath them was already shifting, drawn toward conquest, toward empire, toward a hunger he had not intended to awaken. In those quiet moments, he would whisper to himself, "They see gold. I saw grace." He had crossed the ocean chasing a dream, not merely of wealth or glory, but of revelation. To him, the new lands were not trophies, they were proof that the earth was vaster, that faith could reach beyond reason. But now, in the glittering halls of Spain, his discovery was being reshaped into something colder, sharper. He was celebrated as a hero, yet he felt a stranger in his own triumph. A man who had glimpsed eternity and returned to find the world smaller than before. As the celebrations continued, bells still ringing and banners fluttering, Columbus turned his face toward the west once more. Somewhere beyond the horizon lay the islands, the rivers, the quiet people with gentle eyes. The sea that had carried him away now called him back. But beneath that longing, something uneasy stirred, a faint tremor of dissonance between dream and destiny, between the vision he had followed and the power it had begun to feed. He closed his eyes, hearing the echo of waves against the hull of memory. The cheers of Spain faded into distance, replaced by the eternal hush of the ocean. And in that silence, the Admiral of the Ocean Sea understood. Discovery was never the end, only the beginning of misunderstanding. Chapter 11. The Second Voyage. The second departure was nothing like the first. Gone was the quiet courage of 3 small ships slipping into the dawn. In its place came thunder, 17 vessels crowded with soldiers, priests, settlers, livestock, and greed. The harbour of Cadiz trembled under the weight of ambition. Trumpets sounded, drums rolled, banners of Castile and Aragon rippled in the wind. It was no longer a journey of faith, it was a campaign. Columbus stood on the deck of his new flagship, the Mare Galante, his face solemn beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Around him, nobles spoke of conquest, merchants whispered of gold, and friars murmured of salvation. The sea breeze carried the scent of horses, iron, and prayer. He looked out toward the horizon and wondered whether the ocean would recognize him this time, or turn its face away. On September 25th, 1493, the fleet left Spain, sails swelling like the wings of white birds. Crowds on shore cheered and waved, and the sound followed them far out into the open water. But soon the cheers faded, and only the relentless rhythm of wind and wave remained. The crossing was swift. Trade winds filled the sails, carrying them westward with unnerving ease. Yet as days passed, the silence that once sanctified the sea was replaced by the clamor of civilization expanding. Cages of pigs and chickens squawked in the hold. Horses neighed in their stalls. Men argued, laughed, and drank beneath the stars. The ocean, once a vast cathedral of solitude, had become an echoing marketplace. When land appeared, the sailors shouted for joy. The islands bloomed before them, green, luminous, wild. They dropped anchor off Dominica, then sailed along the chain of the Antilles. But what they found was not the paradise of memory. Villages lay empty. Shores were abandoned. The songs of the Taino were replaced by silence. They reached Hispaniola in late November, where Columbus had left his men at La Navidad. Smoke curled faintly from the hills. As they approached the shore, the air grew heavy with stillness. The fort was gone. Only charred beams and broken timbers remained. Bodies lay buried by time and the tide. The 39 men he had left behind, the first colonists of a new world, were dead. The islanders, when questioned, spoke softly of conflict. The Spaniards had quarreled among themselves, taken women, demanded gold. The Taino, once gentle, had risen in anger. Blood had answered arrogance.
Columbus walked through the ruins, his boots sinking into the blackened earth. The smell of ash lingered. He knelt by a shattered wall and closed his eyes. The ocean had carried them to a paradise, and man had turned it to grief.
Still he pressed on. From loss he sought renewal. On the northern coast he chose a new site, a place where rivers met the sea and the soil promised abundance. He named it La Isabela, after his queen.
The men began to build houses, storehouses, a church. The sound of hammers echoed through the forest. But the earth here was not Spain's. The sun burned hotter, the rains came without mercy, and the food spoiled quickly. The Taino watched from the shadows, no longer smiling.
Sickness came first, fever that burned and froze the flesh, swelling that turned limbs heavy as wood. Then hunger followed. The supplies brought from Spain rotted in the heat, the crops refused to grow. The air smelled of damp earth and despair. Each morning, Columbus rose before dawn and walked to the edge of the settlement where the forest began. He listened to the birdsong, soft and indifferent, and felt the weight of his own silence. This was not the discovery he had dreamed of. The air no longer carried the promise of wonder, but the ache of consequence. Discontent spread among the men. They accused Columbus of false promises, of leading them into a green hell. He spoke of patience, of faith, of time, but even his words felt thin now, worn by disappointment. In his journal, he tried to steady himself with scripture. The Lord tests those he loves. Yet doubt crept in like the fever. He had wanted to open the world's edge, not wound it. The Taino who remained offered food, fruit, and medicine, but the Spaniards demanded more. They searched for gold in the riverbeds, their eyes fevered with greed. When none was found, tempers flared, violence followed, and the gentle island began to bleed again. One evening, as rain drummed against the roofs, Columbus sat alone beneath a palm shelter. The candles flickered in the damp air. He took out his journal and wrote slowly, the ink smudging beneath his fingers. The lands are rich, the people kind, yet we bring sorrow where there was peace. I came for glory and for God, yet I fear I have unleashed something neither understands. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains like the voice of judgment. He thought of the quiet sea that had once carried him west, of the stars that had guided him without question. Now, even the sky seemed troubled. The next morning, he gathered his men and prayed aloud, asking for mercy, for endurance, for forgiveness. Some bowed their heads, others stared blankly, too weary to believe. La Isabela survived, but only barely, a ghost of ambition clinging to the edge of paradise. The fields withered, the wells soured, the graves multiplied. And through it all, the admiral watched the horizon. He had crossed the ocean to unite two worlds, but now they stood divided, one bleeding, the other blind. When the wind rose in the evening, it carried with it the smell of the sea. He closed his eyes and listened, hearing in its breath the echo of his first voyage, the days of endless blue, the songs of discovery, the innocence of wonder before it became empire. Regret crept in quietly, like a tide. He wondered whether the ocean, vast and patient, felt sorrow too, for the faith it had once carried, now burdened with the noise of ambition. And as night fell over La Isabela, the waves whispered softly against the shore, not in anger, but in mourning. Chapter 12. Shadows of Empire. The dream was unraveling. By the year 1496, the colony of La Isabela had become a ghost of its promise, a scattering of crumbling huts, a fortress gnawed by rain, and fields where nothing grew but resentment. The sound of hammers had faded, the laughter of the first settlers was gone. The jungle crept closer each day, vines climbing over broken walls as if nature were reclaiming what man had tried to own. Columbus walked through the settlement in silence, his boots sinking into wet earth. The men barely saluted him now. They muttered behind his back, calling him Admiral with voices that held no respect. Once, they had seen him as a prophet, the man who had led them across the ocean, who had opened the gates of a new world. Now they saw a foreigner, a dreamer trapped in his own myth. Gold had poisoned everything. The word itself had become a prayer and a curse. Men abandoned their posts to search the rivers, sifting mud through trembling hands. When none was found, they turned on each other, blaming the land, the natives, the admiral. Theft, violence, and sickness spread like fever. The Taino, once generous and curious, now hid in the forests. The Spaniards raided their villages for labor and food, demanding tribute they could not give. Columbus tried to keep peace, to order fairness, to remind his men that these people had welcomed them. But his commands fell on deaf ears. Authority dissolved beneath hunger and greed. He had built a world, but he could no longer govern it. At night, the settlement seemed to hold its breath. The fires burned low, their smoke curling toward a sky heavy with stars. From his quarters, Columbus could hear whispers, voices of anger, of plotting. Some spoke of sailing home without him, others, more daring, dreamed of replacing him altogether. He wrote letters to Spain, pleading for aid, for supplies, for justice, but months passed without reply. The empire he had helped create was already slipping beyond his reach. Sometimes, unable to bear the noise of his own failure, he walked to the shore. There, the ocean still breathed, steady, eternal, indifferent. The waves glowed faintly under the moonlight, washing over his boots, as if to remind him where he had come from. The sea had once been his ally, his cathedral, his proof of divine calling. Now it felt like judgment. He knelt in the wet sand, his cloak heavy with dew, and whispered prayers to a sky that would not answer. "Lord," he murmured, "was it you who called me across the waters? Or was it only myself I heard?" The question echoed through him like a hollow bell. He had believed so completely that God had placed the dream within him, that faith had steered his course. But faith, he was beginning to see, could look like pride when reflected in the eyes of men. Each day brought new rebellion. Captains defied him, soldiers ignored his orders, priests quarreled over souls while the sick lay untended. The air smelled of rot and smoke. The jungles sang louder, reclaiming the space that men were too tired to defend. Columbus tried to restore order. He punished thieves, sent deserters in chains, divided rations with military precision. But even justice began to taste bitter. "They obey only fear," he wrote in his journal, "and fear is a poor kingdom." When word reached him that some of his men had attacked a Taino village, burning homes and taking captives, he rode there himself. The smoke still rose when he arrived. Among the ashes, he saw a mother holding her child, both staring silently at him. Not with hate, but with something worse. Disappointment. That night, he could not sleep. He walked to the water again, where the waves whispered against the shore. His reflection trembled on the surface, a man crowned in salt and guilt. He thought of his first voyage, of the calm nights when the stars had guided him west, each light a promise. He thought of Isabella's blessing, of the Queen's soft voice when she had said, "Go and may God guide your sails." He had believed her. He had believed himself. Now he was not sure what he believed at all. The ocean was still beautiful, vast, merciful, unknowable, but it no longer sang to him. It watched. It remembered. In the distance, the drums of the Taino carried through the night, slow and mournful. Their rhythm blended with the surf until it sounded like one voice, the voice of a land mourning its innocence. Columbus closed his eyes. "I wanted to bring light," he whispered. "Why then has everything turned to shadow?" He knew that in Spain, his name was still spoken with reverence. Songs were sung of his courage, his discovery, his glory. But here, in the humid silence of Hispaniola, it was spoken with fear, by both Spaniard and native alike. The Admiral. A title that no longer felt like honor, but a burden too heavy to bear. Sometimes he wondered if his voyage had been divine inspiration, or simply the arrogance of a man who mistook his own longing for God's voice. As dawn broke, pale and tired, he watched the horizon brighten with cold light. The sea glimmered softly as if forgiving. He felt the weight of his failures pressing down, yet within him flickered a stubborn spark. The same restless fire that had carried him across the Atlantic. He would return to Spain, he decided. He would speak to the crown, defend his name, ask for mercy, and perhaps one last chance.
But even as he turned from the water, he knew no voyage, no crown, no map could erase the shadows that had already fallen.
Behind him, the waves continued their slow hymn, washing over the footprints he'd left in the sand, erasing them one by one. Chapter 13. The Final Voyage. By the summer of 1502, Christopher Columbus was no longer the man who had first crossed the edge of the known world. Age had carved deep lines into his face, and pain followed him like a tide. His joints ached from years of storms and sleepless nights. His eyes, once bright with faith, had dimmed beneath the weight of disappointment. Yet the sea still called to him. It always had, softly, insistently, like a mother who never stopped singing to her child, and he could not ignore it. Spain was changing. The court had grown cautious, distant. Columbus's reputation was stained by conflict, accusations and failures in governance. Some said he had lost his judgment, others said his time had passed. But to the Queen, to Isabella, he was still the man who had opened the ocean. When he came before her, frail yet burning with the old vision, she listened. He promised one last voyage, not of conquest, but of discovery. He still believed that beyond the islands he had found, beyond the unknown coasts, lay the true Indies, the fabled lands of gold and spices. "The Lord has not yet revealed all his works," he said quietly, bowing before the throne. "Let me sail once more." And so, at 51 years old, the Admiral of the Ocean Sea returned to the element that had shaped his life. 4 ships carried him: the Capitana, the Santiago de Palos, the Gallega, and the Vizcaína. Their crews were smaller now, their confidence cautious. The ocean, once a stage for glory, had become familiar, but never safe. When they left Cadiz in May 1502, the air was heavy with summer heat. The sails swelled with a steady wind, and Columbus stood at the stern, his cloak pressed against the breeze. Behind him lay a kingdom of crowns and suspicion. Ahead, only the eternal blue. He said little. The men noticed how he spent long hours gazing westward, whispering to the waves. He wrote in his journal of signs and visions, of lights that moved in the night sky, of dreams in which God spoke through the sea itself. "Perhaps," he wrote, "the ocean is not distance, but voice. It speaks to those who listen." They sailed across the Caribbean, through calm and storm alike, exploring the coasts of what is now Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. They found no golden cities, no Asian palaces, only jungles heavy with rain and rivers that gleamed like serpents beneath the sun. Columbus named capes and bays, recorded winds and tides, convinced that each curve of shoreline was the threshold of Asia. But the sea, once generous, began to turn. The ships creaked under constant storms, wood swelled and cracked, ropes frayed, food spoiled, men fell ill with fever. Columbus himself was tormented by pain, gout, weakness, sleepless nights where he heard phantom voices whispering through the rigging. Still he pressed onward, stubborn as ever. "I am near the strait," he insisted to his captains, "the passage to the great ocean." The rains came heavier, the sky closed like a lid, lightning walked across the sea. Then, in June of 1503, a storm unlike any he had known descended upon them. The 4 ships were tossed like leaves upon a raging sea, masts splintered, sails tore, the ocean roared as though it wished to reclaim its wandering child. Men screamed prayers into the wind. Columbus stood by the tiller drenched, his white hair plastered to his face. He did not shout orders, only watched, silent, as if speaking might provoke the sea further. For days they fought against the storm, and the storm did not yield. When at last the winds weakened, 2 ships were gone, swallowed whole. The survivors limped toward the nearest shore, a green island rising like a dream from the mist, Jamaica. They beached the wrecked vessels, laying them side by side to form a floating camp along the coast. The ships were beyond repair, their hulls split, their masts leaning like broken crosses. Columbus, weak from fever, built a shelter of torn sails and driftwood on the deck of one ship. He slept beneath the canvas as rain tapped softly above him, the sea breathing below. Days blurred into weeks. The stranded men grew restless, angry, hungry. Some turned against him, accusing him of madness. Others wept quietly, staring out toward the horizon that never changed. But Columbus, half dreaming, half awake, seemed already elsewhere. He spoke little, prayed often, and wrote by the faint light of dawn. "The Lord has led me here," he wrote, "to the edge of all things. The sea has taken what it gave. Perhaps this is the meaning, to return to the beginning." At night, he would crawl to the deck and look out at the moonlit water. The waves shimmered like molten glass. He could almost feel them speaking to him again, not in words, but in memory. He was young once more, standing on the docks of Genoa, his heart filled with wonder, his mind with fire. The years between felt like foam, fleeting, dissolving. He had sailed the world, found new lands, changed the shape of maps. And yet, in that quiet exile, he realized he had never truly left the sea. It had been his truest home, his oldest companion, and now it was gently reclaiming him. Months passed before rescue came. By then, he was a shadow of himself, thin, grey, his body failing, his eyes distant. When Spanish ships finally appeared on the horizon, the men shouted and wept with joy. Columbus only closed his eyes and he whispered, "At last, the tide turns home."
As they carried him aboard the rescue vessel, the wind stirred the torn sails behind him, making them flutter like ghosts. The sea was calm again, vast, patient, endless.
He lay on the deck, weak but awake, watching the horizon burn with sunset. The color of it, deep gold melting into blue, looked like everything he had ever sought. And as night fell over the Caribbean, the waves rose and fell with the rhythm of his breathing, as if ocean and man were no longer separate things, but one slow, eternal pulse. The sailor who had once crossed the world was crossing now into silence. Chapter 14, the silent horizon. By 1506, the great admiral of the ocean sea was an old man living in near silence. The world he had once expanded had already begun to move beyond him. His name still carried weight in Spain, yet it was spoken now with distance, a legend turned uncomfortable truth. Court politics had dulled his glory. New expeditions sailed without his name on their sails. In the city of Valladolid, in a small, dim room above a courtyard, Christopher Columbus lived out his final days surrounded by maps, papers, and memories that rustled softly like the sea. He was 64, his body broken, his vision blurred, his heart still fixed on the horizon. The hands that had once gripped the helm of destiny now trembled when he lifted a quill. Yet each morning he still wrote. His last journals were filled with half-finished thoughts, fragments of prayers, calculations of distances that no longer mattered. Across the margins he drew small arcs of imagined coastlines, as if the world might still reveal another secret if only he could sketch one more curve. The window of his room looked west. He liked to keep it open even when the wind was cold. The sound of distant bells reached him, mingled with the faint murmur of voices from the street. Sometimes he closed his eyes and heard the sea instead. The slow breathing of waves against a shore only he could remember. His few visitors spoke to him with a reverence tinged with pity. His sons, Diego and Fernando, tended to him faithfully, reading aloud the scriptures or letters from the crown. Fernando would sometimes find him tracing the edge of a map with his finger, whispering softly to himself. "Father," the boy would say gently, "you discovered a new world." Columbus would smile faintly, never lifting his gaze. "No," he would murmur, "I found the Indies. The others just do not yet see it." Even at the end, he held to that belief, that the islands and lands he had reached were the far edges of Asia, the threshold of the East. To admit otherwise would have meant to unravel the very thread that had guided his life. Faith, for him, had never been about proof, but purpose. And purpose must remain whole, even as the body breaks. He prayed often, not for recognition, but for forgiveness. He prayed for the men lost at sea, for the 39 at La Navidad, for the Taino people who had welcomed him with open hands and found their world consumed by foreign hunger. Sometimes his voice trembled when he spoke the words, and tears slipped silently down his weathered face. "Lord," he would whisper, "if I have erred, let my heart be judged, not my voyage."
Outside, Spain thrived. New ships set sail under new captains, Vespucci, Balboa, Cabral, each carrying the fire Columbus had first kindled. Maps grew crowded with coastlines, with names and lines and claims. The simple dream of one man had become the machinery of empires. The ocean, once mystery, was now a road. But for Columbus, there was no empire, only memory. His world was the quiet space between candlelight and parchment, between breath and prayer. Some evenings, when pain allowed, he would walk slowly to the courtyard and sit beneath the orange trees. The scent of their blossoms carried him backward in time, to Hispaniola, to Cuba, to the gentle faces of the islanders who had smiled at him as though he were a messenger of heaven. He wondered if they still lived. He wondered if they had forgiven him. Spring came softly that year. The air grew sweet again, the sun warm against the white walls. Yet his strength was fading. On the morning of May 20th, Columbus woke from a dream in which he was sailing west once more. The water was calm, the sails full, the sky vast and bright. He heard voices, laughter,
prayer, the familiar creak of wood and rope. When he opened his eyes, the sound remained faintly in his ears, as though the sea itself were waiting outside his window. He asked his sons to bring a crucifix to his bedside. He kissed it and whispered, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." Then, with a breath that sounded almost like the turning of a tide, he was gone. For a long time, the room was still. The candle beside his bed flickered once and went out. On the table lay his final map. Unfinished, the ink not yet dry, the lines fading into blankness. Outside, the bells of Valladolid rang for the noon hour. Few in the city knew that a man had just died who had changed the face of the earth. And yet, far beyond the walls, the ocean knew. The waves moved as they always had, patient, endless, without judgment. They washed the shores of the old world and the new alike, carrying in their rhythm both discovery and sorrow. For Columbus's voyage had done more than bridge two continents. It had bridged innocence and consequence. From his journey came the mingling of worlds, of faith and ambition, wonder and conquest, love and loss. The same wind that had carried his ships westward now carried the whispers of countless others, explorers, settlers, slaves. The ocean had become the bloodstream of a new age, rich, turbulent, irreversible. And yet in its depths the silence remained, the same silence that had once surrounded three small ships sailing into the unknown. Centuries would pass, kingdoms would rise and fall, but the sea would still remember. It would remember the boy who stood on the docks of Genoa, staring at the horizon. The dreamer who believed the world could be crossed, the old man who died still chasing Asia. As twilight fell over the Atlantic, the waves turned silver in the moonlight, folding one over another with the slow rhythm of eternity. The horizon stretched quiet and infinite, no longer the edge of the world, but its heartbeat. And in that eternal motion, the ocean kept breathing, slow, timeless, carrying everything that had ever been found and everything that had ever been lost. Closing reflection. As the room grows quiet, let your thoughts sail away. The ocean is calm again. The sails rest, heavy with salt and silence, their edges glowing faintly beneath the moon. The stars drift above like slow embers, mirrored perfectly in the dark water below. Sky and sea, meeting in stillness. The wind has ceased its wandering. Only the tide moves now, gentle and unhurried, breathing in and out like a sleeping world. The voyage is over, the ships have long returned to dust, the men to memory, the maps to history. Yet the sea remains, vast, unchanging, eternal. It holds every whisper of their passage, every prayer shouted into the wind, every moment of faith and fear that carried them forward. What began as a journey across the horizon has become something deeper, a voyage within. The same courage that faced the endless blue still lives quietly in every heart that dares to wonder. The same longing that drove a man beyond the map still stirs in all who look toward the unknown and whisper, "What if?" Now let the waves carry you too. Feel their rhythm steady your breath. Feel the night wrap softly around you. The ocean asks nothing, demands nothing. It only holds you, weightless, between earth and sky. Somewhere, far away, the water folds over the world's edge and disappears into silence. Breathe. Drift. The sea remembers everything. And now, it remembers you too.